Hi, I'm Roman Cybriwsky. I'm a professor of geography and urban studies at Temple University in Philadelphia. I was a Fulbright scholar in the years 2010-11, that is the academic years, 10-11, in Kiev, where I was at the Kiev Mohila Academy in the sociology department. I taught there, and I spent time doing research on a book about Kiev. I came particularly to write a book. I had been to Kiev earlier. I had made a special trip to Kiev where I asked myself the question, do I really want to write a book about this city? Spent a month walking around and imagining myself doing research, talking to people, and learned that such a book is not only what I want to do, but something that needs to be done. So I applied for the Fulbright Fellowship and received it. Came in 2010, stayed a year. I've since been in Kiev many times, lived there for a good part of the year. But for me, this was getting to know the city experience, 2010-11. And that's when I did most of the research and began the writing. But anyway, it's a book that I'm proud of. I think it needed to be written. I'm very glad that I did this. I have fallen in love with the city and continue working on Kiev topics because the place is just so interesting and also incredibly cool. It is, I think, one of the cool cities of Europe. For many people, undiscovered. I think that it will be discovered and can have a very positive future as one of the great European capitals. It's a unique book in that one of the things that I was aware as one of the things I was aware of as I was considering whether I wanted to devote the time to writing a book was that there really is no book about Kiev today other than my own in any language. I was interested in the city and I started to look for materials, things to read, and it was bits and pieces, English, Ukrainian, Russian. I read all these languages, of course. Bits and pieces, and other than history. There's a lot of history about the city. It's a very historic place, but the situation in the city today I found to be just not at all in the literature. And I thought, well, maybe I need to describe this city. In fact, it's undergoing a very interesting transformation, one that I didn't understand at the time, and was a new kind of urban transition that the academic literature about cities needed to understand better. That is a transition from a socialist city, a communist world, to what happens next, the post-socialist city. And frankly, I was a little surprised and shocked at the mess that I found in this city. I was seeing a mess at the same time as I was seeing incredible charm, history, potential, wonderful people. I saw an incredible mess. And I said, well, wait a minute, there is a story here that needs to be told. It's a bigger story than I ever imagined. It's different than the story that I thought I would be writing. And so I decided to undertake the project. And as soon as I started telling people that I'm writing a book, as soon as I started saying this in Kiev, I felt I received tremendous encouragement from person after person. Yes, hooray. Yes, write this book. You need to write it now. Write it fast before they destroy the city altogether. The world needs to know what's going on in Kiev. And everywhere there was this encouragement. Kievans knew of course, what was happening around them and happening to them. This was the time when the population was getting angrier and angrier at the Yanukovych administration. The Yanukovych administration had particular bad impact on the city, its form, its conditions of living, and they were getting worse, and people were angry. One other thing that I picked up on and really believe is that here is a city where anyone you talk to, young, old, different walks of life and so on, they all like the place. It's a place where you find great pride in the city. In Kiev, well, of course people would tell me what's wrong, but they would do this in a context of what a great place this is, and they're taking it away from us. They are taking it away from us. And so I saw this conflict that I thought needed to be described. And so that's what I wrote. The book is called Kiev, Ukraine. That's the main part of the title. And it's kind of a strange title, but it came because Amsterdam University Press wanted me to spell Kiev, K-I-E-V. And I said, no, it's going to be K-Y-I-V. That's the correct way. And they said, well, no, actually, when people do searches, they're going to look for K-I-E-V. And nobody goes for K-Y-I-V. And I says, well, I'll tell you, K-I-E-V is not the book I'm going to write, and we can, stop this contract conversation. Anyway, the compromise then was people could do searches. They would find this book by looking for Ukraine instead of the name of the capital city, and they said, okay, we can do it that way. So that's how I got K-Y-I-V into the title, and that also shows the need for the world outside Ukraine to have a book that explains things about this city. The subtitle is The City of Domes and Demons, from the Collapse of Socialism to the Mass Uprising of 2013-14. So you know what the Mass Uprising is, of course. It's the Maidan revolution, the revolution of dignity. And that's about the time when I stopped my research and wrote my last paragraphs. After that, the book became outdated until the 2016 update. But so it was about the city and how it's been changing from the end of the Soviet period to when I stopped my formal research, the end of the Yanukovych administration. And the City of Domes and Demons refers to how I vision this city. It's a beautiful city with a lot of history, and that is symbolized with its many church domes. Some of them are very ancient, others have been built in recent years. It is a city with a lot of religion in the landscape, and something that is an icon in the city, the domes of the domes of Kiev. But it's a city that is overrun by demons of all kinds. So it's the city of domes and demons, and that's what I described. A beautiful city with great problems caused by people who just don't care about fellow citizens, about the city, about Ukrainian history, and so on. So I called them demons, and I like alliteration, City, Domes and Demons. That's the title. I chose as a illustration for the cover, maybe you can see there's an artwork there, and it's got a bit of a landscape of Kiev. It is, in fact, artwork that is sitting behind me. It's a painting by a Kiev artist named Evelina Buketova, who I encountered her on Andreevsky the artsy street in historic Kiev. There are a lot of painters that show their work.
Sorry. Speak a little bit closer to the microphone.
Oh, okay. Well, I was trying to show that the painting behind me. Yeah. How's that? Oh, well, Anyway, it's a happy scene of Kiev. I bought the painting, of course, and she gave me permission to use it for the cover. It's a happy scene of Kiev that shows a city with historic buildings, new buildings, monuments, the river Dnipro, some recreation going on in the river, and so on, a lot of greenery. And this is the way the city should be. It shows the city growing, and it shows the city's history, and it shows people having fun in the city. And I thought this is the way it's supposed to be. And so I bought that painting, and it's the cover. But a lot of what I saw happening there was just not right. The very first essay in the book, it's a collection of sort of short essays of my own. There are about 100 of them. Actually, I forgot, maybe 70-something. It's a collection of short essays that are organized logically, one after the other. And the first one is called Graffito, or a Graffito. And it shows I saw a graffito on the riser of an escalator that leads from deep down in the subway to one of the subway exits in the center of the city. Very, very long escalator. It takes 2 minutes and 20 seconds to ride up it. And it was on the riser and spread out over 3 steps. It read, "Ukraine is far from heaven," in English. And I thought, wow, this is kind of amazing. I thought that someone was actually kind of a creative in positioning this graffito here, in that you happen to step on the escalator riding up, and you look at this message, riding up, up, up. It's a long ride on an escalator, and Ukraine is far from heaven, and it's still far from heaven. And so I photographed it, and that became figure 1.1, and it set a tone for the book. I showed the photograph to my students soon after I took the photo, and we discussed it, and I asked them, so why is this in English? And they all just sort of in one voice, Ukrainian students, in one voice, well, because we all know that Ukraine is far from heaven. It's the world that needs to know. So, with the end of the Soviet order, disorder set in, and some people with power and connections and money and so on figured that they had free rein to do what they wanted. So lots of things started to happen. For example, rampant development, building new buildings wherever they wanted. Developers took over parkland. There was no plan. There was no coordination. People were doing whatever they wanted on parkland, on unstable slopes, those famous bluffs of Kiev that overlook the river, where long ago it was learned you can't build here because of all kinds of engineering and environmental reasons. But they built anyway on the slopes, including by Yanukovych himself for a totally needless helipad. There's a section in the book called The Helipad from Hell. And so, just a lot of rampant construction. They destroyed some neighborhoods, parts of neighborhoods. They displaced people to knock down buildings and replace them with some that would be profit-making for the developer. They ripped down history. They didn't care about some historic buildings or historic vistas. They put up inappropriate buildings within historic views. They marred the views with a building that doesn't fit. There was simply no coordination for development. So that was one kind of thing. Then there was no concern as well for problems that resulted, such as, what about water supply? What about sewage? I mean, you have to measure all this out and you need the permits and so on, but yet people were building buildings with fake papers, with papers bought through corruption, things like this. There is an office of city planning and an architect of Kiev who was in the dark about what was going on about the city. So just sort of rampant, crazy, unplanned development. Traffic became worse and worse because developers weren't thinking ahead or weren't working with the officials to think about the impact on traffic of certain kinds of development. Parking became worse. Cars started to take over the sidewalks. It was just awful. So that's one kind of issue. The other kind of issue was under socialism. Yes, of course, there was inequality. There were people who had more than others and so on. But the level of inequality, the distance between haves and have-nots, grew tremendously. And it was very painful to see so many people in need, so many people very poor, so many people really struggling to make a living. Everything from, begging on the streets to homelessness and so on. Really hard work that is, old ladies working hard chopping ice on a sidewalk. What society would allow this? And yet, that was just one of the scenes that I saw. Says, why is she chopping ice? Well, it was her job. It was a work that she had. Well, that was one thing that I learned very early. When I settled in for the Fulbright year, I was lucky to get a very nice apartment in the center of the city in Netsko Street, and thought myself to be very lucky that, oh my gosh, there's City Hall just at the end of the street, turn left, and there's and also nearby is the History of Kiev Museum, and so I'm going to be able to get data and learn all about the city, just, with a short walk from where I'm living. And you find out that there's really no data. So you can't just go to City Hall and say, I'm looking for data about such and such. You can't go to a library and look for data. There really aren't data on things that you would think any city has. You have to work on your own. And so I can't answer the question, what percentage of people are poor? It's just information is not available. But there was this glaring gap between haves and have-nots, and the haves were very visible because they were showy. They were showing off. They were in control. You couldn't help but see them because their cars were parked in the center of the city on the sidewalks. You had to walk around them and all this kind of stuff. There was a section in the book, one of the essays, called Bullies with Bentleys. And again, alliteration, but also, the way people drive and, disregarding traffic and disregarding people in general. And so the sociology of the city was then something that caught my attention. And then as a sub-topic under that, there's a chapter called Semi Stories, and it's all about sort of the sex and bride industry of Kiev. I think it's just absolutely amazing that a city and a society that was once, kind of, what's the word, prim, proper, conservative, on their best behavior publicly, became one with that's globally famous for sex tourism, prostitution, in an industry to provide brides for foreign men. And the center of the city, again, where I was living, and, the center always symbolizes the city. It's the way the world sees the city. And the center of the city had an awful lot of attention to the sex industry. And, I don't want to be critical of choices that adults make and so on. But I thought that it was very interesting that in a short time the city has gone from kind of a conservative image about sex to one where sort of anything goes, and where men from foreign countries were coming to play. And as I looked into that, I was, kind of shocked to see advertisements for Kiev as a destination for your bachelor party, So these advertisements would be in, available in English or Dutch or some other European language. And a lot of Middle Eastern countries were also represented in this kind of tourism to Kiev. And so this, too, was something that I wrote about, and something that, interested me. And so, for example, I wrote about Femen, that organization of Ukrainian women. It's since changed a bit, and, it's controversial in many ways, but I was happy to see that this organization started as one to fight sex tourism in a language that sex tourists would note. Bare-breasted women saying, we don't like sex tourism. It got people's attention. So I write about topics like that. Early on in my research, when I was living on Horodetsko Street in the center, I knew that the Museum of the History of the City of Kiev was not far away. It was up the hill, and I had been there some years earlier, actually in 1992, my first trip to Kiev. I traveled with my father to see Ukraine soon after independence, my father from the United States. And we went to this museum, and I thought it was interesting then. Now I wanted to return to it and begin learning the history of the city in detail. And I went there, and it's not here. And, I asked around, and they said, no, it was here. This is now the Supreme Court of the United States. This is now the Supreme Court of Ukraine. And I'll be danged. Where is the museum? We don't know. And so the new government, itself was a raider, displaced the museum, and they liked this wonderful building, and they put the Supreme Court there. And I asked around about the museum, and I actually found it. It was also near where I lived, and I went into this building where I was told that it was located, and I said, I'm here for the museum. And they said, there's no museum here. And I said, well, wait a minute, they told me it was here. Oh, yeah, back there on the third floor where it was, in the back. And, I went there, and it was just a small office of the administrator of the museum. And they were surprised to see me, and I said, well, I came looking for the museum. They said, there is no museum. They just put us here, and there was a skeleton staff and a lot of papers and stuff. Real messy kind of place. And everything's in storage. It's in boxes somewhere. Everything's in storage, and there is no museum. They promised us one. And so the director of the museum at the time, Vitaly Kolovinsky, became an early informant. He was very angry about having lost the museum to raiders, even though it was the government, and then a promise that they would be given a new place, and the promise wasn't being fulfilled. They were just in this office, twiddling their thumbs, and waiting for something to happen while everything was in storage. He was very open. He showed me the storage facilities. He showed me, in fact, he gave me his files of all the museum exhibits and things like this, the photographs and lots of documents and so on, to show me that there is a museum, but it's not available. And so there's an essay there early on. It's called The Missing Museum, the History of the City of Kiev. In that same chapter, there's a section about a conflict over a very small piece of ground at a subway station in the center of Kiev, a subway station called Teatralna, where there are many theaters. Very small piece of ground, used to be a public square for local uses. And all of a sudden the public square had been closed, and we're building a building. And the people are up in arms. And so it was one of the first anti-development protests that I started to follow. And I followed that from beginning to end. Somebody, apparently from Moscow, was building a commercial center on this piece of ground, and no one could find out who authorized this and all this kind of stuff. And people were gathered to protest, and the police were protecting the construction work from the protesters day after day after day. Eventually a building was built, but by then the government in Ukraine was changing, and the developer decided to donate his building to the people of Kiev, and the mayor of Kiev decided that this should be the History Museum. And so here was a building that was hated by the people, that was given, quote, to the people, and proclaimed to be the History Museum. And, of course, Mr. Kowalinsky said, well, we don't want this building, and besides that, it's way too small. And, of course, the protesters pointed out correctly that it is badly constructed, and it is a danger in that right below is the subway, and it could collapse into the subway. It's that badly built. That's what they said, okay? But it's the History Museum. So it became the new History Museum. Mr. Kowalinsky was now out of the picture, new administration, and I went to see it. And it was awful. There were some exhibits that I recognized, including one of my favorite, scale model of the old walled city of Kiev. But it had no... It was really thin. There was empty spaces. The second floor, there are two floors, and the second floor had as a centerpiece the following. Now, I spent 12 years before living in Tokyo. I've written some books about Tokyo. I know Japan pretty well. Japanese is one of my languages. So centerpiece on the second floor of the History of Kiev Museum was a beautiful Japanese kimono. I know kimonos. It was a nice one. It was apparently one that some dignitary from Japan who visited the city gave to us as a gift. And so there it was. Okay, it's a nice kimono, but is it a centerpiece for the history of Kiev? And I was a little scandalized by this, and so were other people who visited this museum, saying it's not just about the kimono, it's about the fact that this museum is just not right. It is not the history of Kiev. And in fact, it's as if somebody's trying to rewrite the history and deny some of the history. And so the end story was that, bad museum in a bad building. Now, more recently, things are a little bit better. The museum is still in place. The exhibits are starting to fill in. There's no more professionalism and thought as to what goes where and the sequence of exhibits and so on. I give them credit for getting better. But under the Yanukovych administration, it was sham history, rewritten history. So these are things that I saw. Let me turn to something else about Kiev that I wanted to emphasize. I said at the start that Kiev is a very cool city, and it really is. And it's a lot of fun for people with any of a number of tastes. Classical music, opera, all kinds of arts, theater, and so on. Contemporary music, bars, nightlife, cafes. It's a great city for attending lectures. One of the things that I just find absolutely amazing is that in Kiev, date night can be, hey, I hear there's a lecture about such and such, and young people go, holding hands, groups of friends. They go to listen to a lecture, and they listen rapidly. It is a city of a very rich cultural life and some really high standards of cultural life. So that's one way that Kiev is cool. The other way that Kiev is cool is geographically. It has this river, the Dnipro, which cuts it pretty neatly in half. The one bank, the right bank, on the west is at higher elevation on bluffs, and it's where the historic city was built, and it grew from there. The lower bank, the east left bank, is low-lying, very flat, extends out to the horizon, and it wasn't really developed until the later Soviet period, 1950s, 60s, and so on. And it is an area of high-rise housing developments. It goes on endlessly. In the river, the population of the city is about 50-50 either side, and the area of the city is about 50-50 either side of the river. So the river divides the city pretty neatly in half. The river has many channels and islands and so on. It's a complex geography of the river. So there's a lot of water frontage given the channels and islands and so on. And it's a big green zone, too. Not all of it is green. There are certain stretches of the river that are industrial or commercial. A big chunk has a busy road right along the riverbank with billboards, and you can hardly see them because of the billboards. But there's an awful lot of green space on the river, which formally is parkland. Some of that comes, ironically, from the destruction of World War II. There used to be more development along the river, but it was destroyed in the war and then never rebuilt by choice to provide Kiev with more parkland and riverfront recreation. Kiev has a lot of beaches, long beaches, wide beaches, short beaches, hidden away beaches, beaches that are hard to get to. So huge public crowded beaches and very private secluded beaches as well. There is no other city in the world that has at its center so much greenery, so much beachland, so much opportunity for outdoor recreation. They have everything there. They have Kachalka, which is a huge kind of muscle beach place where men and women work out to tone their muscles. They have places for horseback riding. They have places for various kinds of boating, canoeing, kayaking, and so on. They have places for off-road vehicles. They have bicycle paths. They have places with wildflowers and meadows. They have just all kinds of natural and sporting attractions, as well as a nightlife zone in the center, and cafes, and concert venues. Everything is right there in the center. No other city in the world has as much land for these kinds of activities. And activity for whatever interests you is there. There's a place for everybody, and there's room left over. It's a place of tremendous opportunity. And then no other city, in other cities in the world, say it's a holiday, a beautiful weekend or something, and the people scatter in all different directions. You leave town and you go to the mountains, you go to the beach, you go to the lake, you go, in various directions. But in Kiev, the people come to the center from all directions, from all these neighborhoods, one side of the city to the other side of the city. They come to the center and they find their place. I like the crowded beach. I like the secluded beach. I like to go camping. I like to, hike in the woods. There's room for whatever you want to do left over. And I think this is absolutely beautiful. No other city has this. And there are other cities with beaches, but they're at the edge of the city. This is the center. Well, I think a lot depends on what happens in Ukraine. I mean, we have to put Kiev into the context of Ukraine, Ukraine's economy, Ukraine's politics, Ukraine's foreign relations, the threat of Ukraine from Russia, and so on. It is possible that the worst could happen. It could become part of Russia someday, So anything is possible. But what I see is that the demons are being defeated for now. Ukraine is holding its own ground, and there is a lot of improvement since the time Yanukovych was president. You don't see so many Bentleys, for example. The day Yanukovych left, the Bentleys disappeared too. I mean, there are some, but the bullies went to Russia. Sex tourism seems to have been reined in because I believe some part of that business was being run by bullies who had no interest at all in the reputation of Ukraine. They have left so that, there is more and more attention in Kiev to centralized planning, rational city planning, planning according to law. There's some good people working in the planning office. So I think that things are getting better. And they will have as a resource a city of good people, a city of history and historic landscapes, a city of culture and nightlife, and at the very center, something that no other city has, this enormous green space that attracts people from all directions to be together. And when you're together, you're building civic society. As I said earlier, Kyivans love their city. They're really proud. And with that as a resource, it is likely that this will be a great European capital. Another reason that I wrote this book or was attracted to Kiev is I didn't know very much about it. I'm an urbanist. I had written about American cities. That's how my career began. I worked in Canada. I was in Vancouver for some period, watching that city develop. And then I went to Asia, and I was based in Tokyo, and I wrote some books about Tokyo, and then also about other Asian cities. But Ukraine, the language of the country of my parents, language my parents taught me, was something I didn't know very much about. And I decided it was time to learn. And so I came a little naive, perhaps. And so to answer your question directly, were there things I didn't expect to find? I didn't expect to find these problems. I didn't expect to find a city overrun with demons. I surely didn't expect to find a city that was a global capital of sex tourism, for example. In some of the scenes that I saw, billboards outside Verkhovna Rada, the National Parliament building. Billboard, I mean, for one thing, not many national capitals would allow advertising billboards in their government districts. But here, just outside the government district, outside the Parliament building, I have a photograph that's, I found it shocking or, surprising. How could they allow this billboard that advertises epilation services, Brazilian wax jobs, just outside the National Parliament building? How could they allow this? Well, they don't care. It is all about driving Ukraine down. And that's what I thought of, that's what I learned about the Yanukovych administration, okay? It was all about driving Ukraine down, removing its history, undermining its society. And I thought it was amazing when the people rose up. And so, these were things that surprised me. One thing I thought was interesting, I don't know to what extent people are familiar with the fact that Kiev is the 11th largest city in Europe. That sort of caught me by surprise, but it is more populous than Rome. It's more populous than Paris. A lot of famous places are not as big as Kiev. From 1 through 7, it's Istanbul, Moscow, London, St. Petersburg, Berlin, Madrid, and Kiev. With 2.9 million people officially, but the population is certainly over 4. There's a lot of uncounted people and a lot of growth. So it is a really big city. And of these big cities in Europe, it is the one that is known least well in the outside world. And yet it is so cool and has so much potential that it's almost you can't miss unless some demon decides we have to take this potential away. And one demon decides and says we have to drive this place down. And that's what today's war is about.